All right, Wayne Bettis here, the founder of the Off the Tools podcast. I just want to introduce you to our brand new sponsor, directplumbing.supplies.com. It is founded by a former tradesman who has set up his own plumbing and heating merchants. He has an online shop, which is obviously at directplumbing.supplies.com, and he delivers across the UK. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the rest of the show.
Welcome to the Off the Tools podcast, in association with the Worcester Bosch 8000 lifestyle range, with your host, Wayne Bettis.
Welcome to this episode of Off the Tools. I'm very excited to have a lady on the show that some of you may have already heard of. She's a published author. She runs a business consultancy firm. Her name is Alison Warner. Welcome to the show, Alison.
Thank you very much, Wayne. Nice to be here.
I've been wanting to. I think we first communicated about 8 months ago, didn't we, about getting you on? And just life gets in the way for everyone, doesn't it? We're all busy, so I'm glad to finally have you. If you could just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you, where you've come from, and what you're doing.
Sure. Okay. Well, thanks very much for inviting me, Wayne. I've been running Evolve and Grow, which is a business coaching consultancy for unbelievably almost 10 years now. I have to pinch myself really when I say that. And in the latter years, probably around 2015, after working with lots of different small businesses, I realized that there was a massive potential within the construction and trade sectors. This was having worked with several businesses in that sector and decided to specialize. I discovered that nobody else was doing it in the UK that I was aware of. There's a few business coaches in Australia that are, but from my research at that time, there was nobody that was looking at this as a sector, and so decided to specialize in. And there's various reasons for that. I love working with trades. My background is in retail and hospitality, so you could say completely unrelated, although I think business really, there's always some commonalities in any business, and there are actually some things that the two sectors have in common, which I might touch on during the interview. But quite briefly, I worked for companies like Pizza Hut, Starbucks, Pizza Express, and I think that experience really stood me in good stead in terms of the systems and processes that these organizations have that are so desperately needed often within small business. So absolutely love what I do. I'm very fortunate that I do a job that doesn't really feel like a job, actually.
So am I right? So I'm right in saying then you had no direct connection to the trades and construction industry. It weren't in you from previous works. Then it was just something that developed into it.
Yeah, I fell into it. My first trade client was an air conditioning company, and they rapidly grew, and they referred me on to an electrician, and then it was a similar kind of experience there. And I noticed that these types of clients were getting results far quicker and growing far quicker than, say, financial advisors or web developers. And I think that's often because if you're a trade and you're good at what you do and you're good with customers, then your business just naturally grows. There's enough demand out there for the service. If your boiler breaks down, you need to get your boiler fixed. It's not a luxury item. And so there's plenty business out there. And those people who are good at their trade attract more and more, and then they start employing people. And then before they know it, they've actually got a business, but they've still got the foot in the business. They're still working on the tools, and so life can become very stressful, and they can enter this kind of overwhelm.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I wrote an article recently called "The Success Trap." Basically, exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
It's where it's a curse, isn't it? Being good at your job, it becomes a curse unless you embrace the sort of learning aspect, and that's where people like you come in. Business coaching in the trades industry is very unheard of. It's not a common practice. Whereas if you look at other sectors, they wouldn't operate a business without a business coach or a business structure.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I definitely see the need, the urgent need, I would say, because I see so many people that spend the vast majority of their time putting out fires all day,
Yeah.
whereas having some basic sort of systems and processes and a little bit of structure could really alleviate it. It's transformed my business since I've not worked with you directly, but your book for me was one of the first sort of like personal business development books that I read. And for it to be worded in a way that someone like myself, like a tradesman, I'm not an educated man, sort of like formally educated. So for me, the book explains, basically it's like a manual, isn't it? It really is. So the book is called Build and Grow. When did that actually get released? When did you write that and publish it?
September 2017 it came out. Yeah. So started writing it probably about 9 months earlier. Took about 6 months to write it, and then 3 months of editing. That was more the painful part, but that's really good to hear that it's easy to read, because I wanted it to be very practical. I didn't want it to be full of theory. I wanted it to, if there was theory in there, I wanted it to relate to everyday life, and as you say, to almost be a manual that somebody could pick up, go to the section that related to them most at that time, and give them the information that they need to implement straight away.
What you just said there is exactly what I use the book for.
That's good.
So I've read it front cover to back cover, but literally the way it's laid out, I can literally just choose a section that might be something that I need a little bit of reassurance on, or a little bit of a tweak on the knowledge that I've got from it, just to make sure I've understood it, and that is what it is. And I think that's why I enjoyed it so much, because a lot of the sort of bigger sort of books that cover business developments and things, one, they're not designed for tradesmen, predominantly tradesmen. The wording in there, and like you say, it's a lot of theory, whereas your book really gives us some hands-on things that we can just do and implement and start seeing the results. So it's a fantastic book. So a quick plug for that, anybody that wants to learn a bit more, it's called Build and Grow. I believe, is it on Amazon?
It's on Amazon, absolutely. Yeah, how to go from tradesperson to managing director, and it was actually my clients that chose that title.
Okay, yeah,
interestingly,
and that's very fitting, because a lot of people don't take that jump between the two roles. They try to be everything to everybody, and if you want to run an actual business, you have to make that jump, don't you, from tradesperson to director? So
yeah, and that's an interesting point that you make, because not everybody does want to grow, and that's, I think, a decision that you have to make. Is this something I want to grow and turn into what I would say a proper business, as opposed to you just selling your time for money? And I think if it is a direction you want to go in, then you have to come off the tools, and start focusing on being the managing director of your business. It's very difficult to have feet in both camps.
Yeah, when my first business that I had, it grew very, very quickly, and I didn't take that jump. I was trying to be doing it all, and short story, it all went wrong, basically, because I didn't have any knowledge and didn't have the time to focus on running the business. So this time round, I am off the tools, hence the name of the podcast. I decided that when I was ready to grow and expand, I couldn't do it by being a tradesman anymore. I had to take that leap of faith. And like you say, it's not what everybody wants.
That's it. Yeah.
For those that want it, it's a very big culture shock as well, isn't it? Because if for me, I spent 10, 12 years out there, working with the lads, all the banter, the fun, and the relaxed atmosphere of it all. So it does take some time to adjust to that new role. Like as you can see now, I'm in my office, and sometimes it's a bit like, I want to get out, but I know that for the bigger picture, I have to remain focused. Obviously, one of the forewords in the book was by a legend of our industry, the plumbing industry, Charlie Mullins, OBE. So, what was
That's right.
how did it come about that he was a part of the book, and what happened there?
Sure. So I belong to an organisation called BNI, Business Networking International, which I'm sure many trades will have heard of and maybe are a part of. It's really how I ended up working with this industry. And I've grown my whole business through BNI. So I've been in it 9 years. And we always say in BNI to be specific when asking for introductions. Because if you're specific, then you're more likely to get the referral. It helps people to go out and get that person or somebody like them. And so I asked for an introduction to Charlie. I think it was about 4 times, and on the 4th occasion there was a visitor in the room that day who had had a beer with him in a pub 4 years previous, and came up to me afterwards and said, look, would you like me to introduce you? And he did. And within 10 minutes, Charlie's PR team had come back to me saying, yeah, come in and meet him. So I spent a couple of hours with him, really to interview him, to understand from his point of view what had his learnings been in growing Pimlico Plumbers. And, it hasn't been a smooth path. He's very... as you'd expect, no business is really. He's had a couple of bumps in the road, which he's very open about in his biography. But what was interesting was, although we're from completely different backgrounds, we're actually very much on the same page, which I think was a surprise to me, actually. He's very much systems, process, and finding people, surrounding yourself with people who are good at the things that you aren't. Yeah. And so it was a really interesting discussion, because we very much were coming from the same place, but from completely different backgrounds. Yeah, and he was charming. He's been very, very supportive of Evolve and Grow, and promoted us and promoted the book. So yeah.
Well, using that BNI charter there, I might have to try and tap you up for an introduction, because I do want to get him on my show as well.
So. Right. Okay.
We'll have to have a chat about that another time.
Yeah.
Right. So with what you're doing now then, so are you hands-on? Is it online coaching, or is it where the client comes to you, or do you go to them? How does it actually work with what you do day to day?
So it's a mixture. Historically, it's been all face-to-face. So one of the things, one of the challenges I had was I was always at capacity. So the only way I knew I could scale my business was to bring other people on. I mean, there's various ways business coaches can do it. You can do it through group coaching, or you can do it through effectively licensing, which is the path that I decided to go down. So in writing the book, that enabled me to get out of my head what it was I was doing with clients, and put it into a system, and the build system was born. And so I've got 2 other coaches on the team. So we've now got increased capacity to help more people. I would say 90% of our clients are face-to-face. So it's very much one-on-one hand-holding, if you like. We work with people for a minimum of 6 months. We have 3 different 6-month programs to suit different budgets, and then often people come off that and go on to a monthly retainer. But in writing the book, we started to attract people from around the country. So obviously that's not possible if they're in Scotland or if they're in Cornwall. Face-to-face is not an option, and so we use Zoom. And that can work really well. I was a little bit reticent about it, I must admit, at first. But I find that it actually makes the session really focused, because you're both looking at the same thing at the same time. So if you're analysing the figures, for example, or if I'm demonstrating, face-to-face, I would be drawing something up on the flip chart. Well, I just use software to do that online. And it works the same way. And even better, we can then save it and email it to them. So. Yeah,
I've done business coaching via Zoom, and I've not had any downside to it. Like you say, it's you're still focused. It's still one-on-one. But like a coach that I was working with was over in America, which obviously I'm not going to go flying over there to have a one-day meeting. And but yeah, the modern technology allows for that to happen, doesn't it? So basically,
absolutely.
You can serve anybody anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. The programs really lend themselves to that
excellent.
very well. Yeah.
What would you say is like the most common sort of pitfall that when clients come to you? What are their biggest problems? What's happening for them to reach out?
So we've actually done some research into this. It's a great question, and we've pinned it down to 3 things. And I think we're very mindful to talk about it in their language and not my language. And I can give you an example of what I mean by that. So the 3 biggest questions that we get asked are, how do I make more money? And what normally follows that is, I'm working really, really hard and I don't understand why I've got so little in my bank account. And obviously there's various reasons for that. The second one is, how do I grow? So I want to grow, I want to scale, but I'm not too sure where to start. And the third one would be, and it's not always a question, in fact, it's very rarely a question, but it's stress around people. Mm-hmm. So people letting them down, not doing the job to the standard that the business owner wants. So some kind of stress around people. So I'll go back to the first question. So the first question, how do I make more money? Previously, I perhaps would have talked about that in relation to how to improve your cash flow or how to understand your numbers. And I realized that's actually not what people want. It is, in terms of the outcome of those questions, what they want, but that's not what's keeping them awake at night. What's keeping them awake at night is, I'm working really, really hard. I know I'm owed money by XYZ client. I know that job might come off, and they're doing the totting up in their head. Everything's in their head. Yeah. And that, I mean, I could go into the neuroscience of that, what that does to your brain, but essentially it tires you out massively.
I've been there many times, and it's a horrible place because you can't even quit. It's not like a job you can just jack in. It's you're stuck, so you have to find a solution, don't you? So that's interesting to hear. I'm pretty sure a lot of the people that will be listening to this show are gonna it's like nail on the head there. Yeah. I think a lot of people are gonna be doing that every night, unfortunately. You mentioned about how to grow. So do you touch on marketing and sort of advise on advertising and sort of getting more work? Is that something you do, or is
yes, in short, but invariably that's not the immediate solution. Yeah. So invariably what we find is the business is not taking advantage of the demand that's already out there. So one exercise that we do is called the customer journey, which maps out exactly that, the journey from inquiry all the way through to the job being completed. And the purpose of that, first and foremost, is to highlight where there's bottlenecks. We also sometimes mystery shop a business as well, because that first impression, i.e., how many rings was the phone answered within? Was it answered, or did you go to voicemail? If it went to voicemail, how quickly did someone call you back? When they called you back, was it somebody professional, well-spoken on the other end of the phone, or was it somebody in a van going in and out of reception, looking for a pen to make notes? So all of that first impression piece is so key, isn't it? It doesn't matter what business, this goes back to the fact, my background's retail hospitality, but it doesn't matter. If you're in business, you're selling a product, you're selling a service in both those sectors, and that first impression is so vital. Yeah. And so I always say, right, let's get your operation pretty much perfect before we go out and attract more. And so many businesses do that, not just trades. They'll spend tons on marketing, but they haven't got their customer service, their delivery right. And so really you're just wasting that money. You're just inviting more people to have a bad experience or a mediocre experience. And I talk about this in the book as well. In the nicest possible way. It's actually perhaps easier in this industry to make a good impression because the standard has lots of opportunity. I'm using my words carefully.
I think I totally get where you're coming from on that. Yeah.
So actually,
you have to be better than those around you, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you just get the basics right, and then maybe throw in a couple of little tweaks here and there that make you stand out, that don't cost money. These are just things that make you stand out, that make you look like you know what you're doing, and you're running a business, and you're a good business person as opposed to a good builder or plumber or electrician. That's obviously very important as well. So it's easy actually to, in the book I talk about a bell curve of customer service. Yeah. So if you think about the bottom 10% of experiences that you have and the top 20% of experiences you have, at those 2 points, some kind of emotional reaction has taken place. You've either really, really hacked off, or you're really, really delighted. And what happens when an emotional reaction like that has taken place, you go and tell other people. And so if you fit into that middle 70%, then, you just fade into oblivion. Yeah. You might not be mentioning it to anybody, but if you've been absolutely wowed, you'll tell people. And that is the quickest way, I think, to grow in this industry. Other industries are far more competitive. If you look at web development, financial advice, these are other sectors I've worked with. You're up against a lot more good competitors, and therefore you arguably have to spend more on marketing. But in this industry, get your operation right. And then if you're still wanting more, by all means, obviously website is very important, that you can be found and that looks good. But that's all part of that kind of health check of, what image are you portraying? Get that right first, and then go and invest.
We, in our community off the tools, we had a debate around sort of this subject, and to be fair, I don't think I did give it the credit from you, because I've read and listened to so many things. But now we've just had this chat, I'm pretty certain that that's where the methodology come from. And I basically opened this sort of like post as, why are you spending thousands of pounds trying to attract new clients? What would you do if I dropped 50 new customers on your doorstep tomorrow? Yeah. And the vast majority of people were like, I wouldn't know what to do.
Yes.
And I said, why are you spending money? If you can't deal with the demand that you've already got,
yes,
there is no point throwing money at advertising, is there?
And of course, it's not just about wanting more sales either, because generally what people are wanting is more money in their bank account.
Yeah.
Well, getting new clients is the most challenging way of doing that. So if we look at the ways of increasing your profit, you can reduce expenses. That's the easiest way. Or you can increase sales. And there's various ways you can increase sales, in terms of looking at your margins, getting people to come back and use you again, as well as going out and getting new clients. So it's really trying to understand what is it you're trying to achieve, and then looking at the best way to do that. Because people naturally just think, oh, I need more customers, therefore I need to spend a load on marketing.
Yeah, no, I agree. And for the last sort of 18 months within my own plumbing business, because I run a plumbing and heating, I'd run two, we've literally been focused on that, just sort of shoring the foundations up, I suppose, is probably the best way.
Absolutely.
That you can't start to grow properly if you haven't got basic systems, processes, and procedures in place, can you?
That's right. Yeah. Well, and worst, you're inviting people to have a poor experience, and then that could push you into the bottom 10%, and people are talking about you for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, because I think isn't there some study that showed that a person that has a bad experience will share it with 20 people, whereas someone that has a good experience will share it with like 8 people or something like.
Yeah.
Massively
they share, basically. As I say, if you've been either really hacked off or really delighted, you will tell people. Yeah.
So no, I love that bit where you said about the people in the middle. They're a lot of them are going to be doing a good job, but they're not sort of exceeding that expectation. So they're not reaping the rewards by that, are they? Yeah, no, I really like that. That's kicked in there. We'll get back to the book a little bit. So
there's lots of, I guess this is probably part of what you've done. It is tradespeople generally are going to be very visual based, and you've got lots of good graphics in here, haven't you? Is that something you developed, you sort of insisted on, or was that someone else's input that brought them in? Because like I'm looking at the customer inquiry journey, for my mind, that you could have written that in a 2-page PDF. Right, and I wouldn't. I might have read it. I wouldn't have. Read it.
Sure.
Whereas I can like follow this like a map, which is for me is priceless. Yes. Was that purposely, or is that just the way?
It's a really good question. I've never actually thought of it, Wayne. To be honest, it is the way I communicate. So 67% of our brains are visual.
Yeah.
And so if you can put something into a visual format, you're more likely to understand it and remember it.
Yeah.
And so to be honest, it just reflects the way that I work with clients.
Okay.
That customer journey, that is actually a real life customer journey of a client that's in the book. And so that's something that we would always do. I always have a flip chart in sessions. And as I say, if it's online, then we use mind mapping software. And we do it that way because people can, if you just get a completely different engagement level, if somebody can actually see it. For example, if people are in overwhelm, the exercise that we would then do is mind mapping. So Tony Buzan developed the mind mapping technique, and he found that the brain prefers to see something in a visual format as opposed to a linear list.
Yeah.
And so if people arrive and they're overwhelmed, I go, right, I know that's what exercise we're doing today. Let's just get everything out of your head down onto a mind map, and you can just see them visibly relax. And because they can see it, they can then compartmentalize and go, oh, right, well, if I dealt with that first, that would have an impact on that. And, it helps them formulate that plan.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think I've got Tony's software on my Mac. I haven't used it for a while, to be honest, but I think, like you just said, I didn't know the correlation between being overwhelmed and using it. And I think at the time that I looked for it, I was in an overwhelmed state, whereas now I'm a bit more. Everything's a little bit in control, so maybe that's why I haven't revisited it, I suppose. So apart from your book, which there's going to be links for everyone to go and buy because I'm strongly recommending it. Would there be any other books that you think that would help tradespeople, or anything anywhere else they could get some more material to
That's a good question. I mean, there's generally the other books that I often recommend. I mean, obviously there's the E-Myth, which there's actually the E-Myth for contractors. So that's probably the closest for the trade industry.
Yeah.
In terms of leadership, if people are interested in developing their ability to manage people and understand the psychology of what makes people tick, I often recommend David Rock's Your Brain at Work. So that's a relatively new piece of research that's been done between leadership experts and neuroscientists, and it looks at what's going on in people's brains at work. And he's got something called the SCAR framework. So again, it's very easy to understand. It's an acronym that stands for 5 different things, and it effectively it's what's important to people in different amounts.
Right.
So he talks about, for example, SCAR stands for status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. And each of us will place a different level of importance on those 5 elements. So that can be a really good one for understanding, right, that's why that person gets really upset when I do that. Or that's why that person responds really well when I do that. So, because really, growing a business and employing people, you have to be a psychologist, a counselor, a disciplinarian. You have to wear all of these different hats at different times. So the more you can understand about what makes people tick and how to get the best from them, that's great for self-development if you enjoy that sort of thing.
Yeah,
often refer to Stephen Covey as well. It's not such an easy read. Stephen Covey's seven Habits of Highly Effective People. So it's a bit more theoretical, but concepts such as the emotional bank account. So thinking about your relationship with people as a bank account, and every time you do something that they appreciate, you're crediting that bank account. Every time you're doing something that they don't like, you're taking a withdrawal. He also talks about sharpen the saw, which is very relevant to this industry. So that's the concept of taking a step back and working on the business rather than in it. So there's lots of Covey.
Is that the analogy where it says, like, if you had 6 hours to chop the tree, I'd spend 5 sharpening the sword? Is that come from that? Does it?
Probably, I would imagine so. It's a briefly, it's a fable. He talks about a guy walking through the forest one day, and this lumberjack's furiously sawing away at this tree, and he can see that the saw is blunt. And he says to the guy, if you just took a step out and sharpened the saw, he said he'd be able to chop that tree down so much quicker. And the guy goes, mate, I haven't got time to be doing that. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
And it's the same thing in business. It's where I haven't got time to take a couple of hours out to plan where I want to take the business. I haven't got time to work on implementing a new system. And I understand it. I get it. But unless you actually make that decision and commit, then nothing will change. If anything, it'll get worse.
Yeah.
And I've seen some terrible cases of I think we attract less of this now, but I have had clients, and I'm sure my team have as well, come for consultations, and they are so stressed, and they've either had a nervous breakdown in the past, or I can see that they're heading to one, and it's kind of last chance saloon by the time they get. And that's very hard to then turn that around. Not impossible, but it's very hard.
I can imagine. Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Moving on a little bit now. Have you got any specific success stories and that with clients that you've worked for? I know there's some in the book, but is there anything that sort of springs to mind?
Yeah, lots. I suppose one of my proudest is a guy who, for different reasons, it's not necessarily about how much he grew his business by, although he did, but it was a chap that came to see me who was really down on himself. I could see his self-esteem was on the floor. He lacked confidence, wasn't charging people correctly enough, was being taken advantage of massively, and I could see that was the problem. And unless that was fixed, then, because our business is just a reflection of ourselves. And so I said to him, I can help him, but you're going to have to go through some short-term pain where you're going to have to kind of follow through and do what I say, and it's going to feel really awful, as in you have to put your prices up, start charging for this that you're giving away for free at the moment, because his I could see his material costs as a percentage of sales, which is ridiculous. That's one of the key measures that we look for, actually, to see if things are operating well in the business. So generally, and it's difficult because there's lots of different sectors obviously within trades, but generally your materials should be anything between 28 and 35%. But I think this business was up around 60.
Right, yeah.
So there just wasn't enough to cover the overheads, and that's why they were living hand to mouth. I still work with them now, and 3-4 years down the track. So it was lovely. We got the business sorted. He followed through. He did everything I suggested, and the business grew and the profits grew, and he had money. But as a result of that, the change in him personally was lovely to see, because he started to grow in self-esteem and confidence, and he started to say, no, that's not right. I'm not going to accept that. And no, this is the way it's going to be. And then he was able to go and buy a boat. He'd always wanted to buy a boat. And he was able to do that after about 18 months. And
wow.
And that's one of the main ones. And then Jacques, who's in the book, still work with him, air conditioning company. He's a completely different person today to back then, because he is a managing director. You know, he looks like an MD, he talks like an MD, makes decisions like an MD. There's still challenges, there's always problems to solve, but to see the growth in him as the business has grown is been very, very rewarding.
Sounds good. Yeah, no, it's and when you're working with someone sort of one to one, I suppose they become a good friend in many ways, because you're sort of, you're diving into quite a personal space, aren't you, with them?
Very much. Yeah. I know. I mean, that's why I love what I do. I'm very, very lucky. It's very rewarding.
You mentioned the red flag of the figures. I'm guessing something that you do is make us look at the figures, because again, being most tradespeople that I know, figures are the last thing on their mind. You know, the last thing they want to be doing is looking at what percentage of this is against that, and I suppose that's probably one of the biggest areas that people struggle with. Am I right in that?
Oh, very much. And not just trades. I would say financial literacy is something that the majority of people that I've worked with struggle with. And it's possibly not because they're thick or they can't do maths. I think I'm lucky in that the companies I work for, Pizza Hut especially, when I started working for Pizza Hut in '94, I didn't realise it at the time because I had nothing to compare it to, but the management training program that I did with them was just amazing. I mean, you just got so much knowledge and experience within the first 3 months, and then hands-on managerial experience that really stood me in good stead. But one of the key things that was drummed into you that you got very, very knowledgeable about was profit and loss.
Yeah.
And you kind of lived and died by your profit and loss. So really that's how, I went on to be an area manager with them, and you were only ever as good as your last P&L. And so reading a P&L for me, I'm lucky, it is something that comes quite naturally. I do love figures. I can look at a profit and loss and pretty much not understand what's going on in the business necessarily, but know what questions to ask in order to understand what's going on in the business. Yeah. As I say, that material percentage is a key metric. I can get a pretty good indication of what might be happening, and as I say, the questions to ask. And so it's an interesting one because, some people might say, oh, why do I need to look at the figures? I've even had accountants say, why does this business coach need figures every month? And I refer back to a guy called Warren Buffett, who, he is very famous for saying, if you don't know the scores, he likens running a business to watching a football game or any game of sport. If you don't know the score, how do you know who's winning and losing?
Yeah.
And it's exactly the same in business. So it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because we've got this dichotomy of people saying, I want more money. I don't understand why I'm working so hard and I haven't got the money to show for it. But at the same time, maybe a disinterest or not understanding why it's important to look at the figures. And it can be a really quick win. Often I look at businesses' figures and I go, right, well, the problem's here. So do this, reduce this, and suddenly you'll have 15% net profit rather than 5% net profit. Yeah. And actually that equates to so many £1,000. Like, really? Yeah, absolutely. So it's working, a bit of a cliche, but working smarter, not harder.
Yeah. No, definitely. And I think we're going full circle here. It's time. That's what most good tradespeople struggle with is the time. Because that's the easy excuse, isn't it? I suppose that's I'll do that later, or I haven't got time for that today. But if they keep doing that, it's just nothing's going to change, is it? And like you say, it's just going to get worse and worse for people. And I'm very regimented with my diary, literally to the point. Every half an hour of my day is planned.
Wow, right.
90% of the day, even like my breaks. Like I've got 4 children. 12 o'clock, boom, it's in the diary. I walk my youngest daughter to school, and like purely because otherwise I just get lost. I'll pick up my phone, I'll go on Facebook and all that, whereas I just schedule it.
Well, that's great.
I allow little buffers for emergencies, because like you say, when you run a business, nothing runs smoothly. There'll always be the engineer that's called in sick or the job that's overrun. So you have to have a little bit of flexibility. But I think I take a lot of inspiration from the military. I've not been in the military, but a lot of the things I read and a lot of people that I aspire to are ex-military, and there's no way in hell that they would wake up in the morning not knowing what their expectations are for the day, where they had to be, and you know, and that's what I think where I've mirrored that from. Do you find, do you have to work on people's time management, or is that something that just evolved with what you're doing?
No, absolutely. That's another exercise in itself. So I was saying earlier about people that are in overwhelm, you know, sometimes it's the mind map exercise, sometimes it's the urgent important matrix, so some kind of time management tool. But it's interesting you talking about how you manage your time and how you like to be, and the fact you attracted more to a militarial style. That will directly relate to your talent dynamics profile. So talent dynamics is a psychometric test that we use. So the first two things we do with clients are to put them through talent dynamics and to look at their year-end accounts. First two things, because the talent dynamics tells me the strengths of the business. The figures tell me the strengths and the opportunities. Sorry, talent dynamics tells me the strengths of the individual, the business owner, and the figures tell me the strengths of and opportunities of the business.
Right.
So that's kind of our starting point. But talent dynamics is a psychometric that's been around for about the last 10 years. It's specifically for entrepreneurs. It's, in my experience, very simple, easy to understand. Yes, it's theory, but it's very, very practical, and it almost gives permission to people. I see the relief in people when they go, oh, I don't have to be good at doing X. I understand now why I'm good at this, but I'm not so good at this. And there's a different way to tackle it. So, you know, if you're a supporter profile, for example, and a lot of trades are, or a creator, let's say you're a supporter, then you love being out and about around people. Putting that sort of person in an office, they're going to hate it. But it doesn't mean to say they can't grow a business. They'll just grow a business in a slightly different way. So a supporter would need a trader and a mechanic to support them. So we always know wherever they are, we know the two profiles they need to complement them.
Yep.
And so a trader would be looking after the day-to-day, and a mechanic would be putting systems and processes in place.
To balance the seesaw, effectively.
Absolutely, exactly. Or a three-legged stool. If you think of it in a three-legged stool, if you remove one leg or both legs, the stool falls over. And that's why businesses fall over if they grow without having these energies in place. Or you might be a creator. Creators are often trades as well. They're very big picture. They have lots of ideas. They might see lots of opportunities to start new businesses. They'll be forever coming up with new ideas, but they're not the best person to actually implement and see it through. So actually a creator would need the supporter to go out and build the relationships and the partnerships, and they'd need an accumulator, and that person is very introvert, detailed, has a natural sense of timing, make great office managers, that type of position. So again, you've got your two legs, as it were. It was created by a guy called Roger James Hamilton, who I worked with for about 5 years. It's used by, the last count, it's probably more now, but the last count was over 750,000 entrepreneurs around the world. Yeah. So,
it sounds, I've not done that specifically, but I've heard of one called DISC. Is it a similar thing to that?
Absolutely, yeah. So all psychometrics stem from a guy called Carl Jung, who was a psychoanalyst in the late 1800s, and he discovered that we're a mix of 4 different energies. So there's loads of different psychometrics on the market. DISC is another one that's commonly used, probably because it's simple, easy to understand. You've got your 4 different types. It's often used in recruitment, but we use talent dynamics in recruitment as well as development.
Okay.
It just makes so much sense, and people
Yeah.
I just see this relief on them, because often they've been told, oh, you're no good at this and you need to knuckle down and sort this out. And actually, it's not because they're stupid, it's because their strengths lie in different areas. It's the whole. So it's the famous Einstein quote, if you tell a fish to climb a tree, it'll go through its whole life thinking it's stupid.
Yeah. You have to have the expectations no, definitely. Back to that talent dynamics. I'm a little bit disappointed in myself, to be fair, because one thing that I sort of constantly go on to people is that you have to have a grasp on your current reality before you can start moving forward. You can't lie to yourself. You have to know where you are now, and before you can even start looking at where you want to go. And for me to not have done this talent dynamics, it's going to be something that I'm going to have a little dive in.
Yeah, we can do that. It's slightly cheaper to do it through us because we're partners of the Institute. So it's £50 plus VAT.
Cool.
It takes about 10-15 minutes to do it online.
Excellent.
And it's well worth it. You get a 32-page report.
Cool. Yeah, well, after this call, we'll
okay, great.
We're running out of time now, so I'm just going to do a couple of quicker questions, if that's okay. So, if you were a one-man band now, one-person band, should I say? Sorry. What advice? What would be the one or two things that you should be doing now before doing anything else?
Okay, this is going to sound like a shameless plug, given what we've just been talking about, but it would have been the same answer. The first one, definitely to do talent dynamics, so you can understand where your strengths lie. I mean, I'm assuming that this person's made the decision to grow, they want to grow, because that's the first one.
With the people that listen to this, is generally people that have aspirations to become a bigger business. Yeah.
So the first thing I would say, do talent dynamics. That's a very small investment in yourself, and that will highlight where your strengths lie and the two people that you need to involve in the business in some shape or form to balance it. So that's not necessarily employing them. So it could be, for example, that you start to outsource your bookkeeping, or you start to outsource your telephone calls. And that would be to a freelancer. So it's very limited risk. You only use them for as much as you need, for example. That could be it. The second thing, I would say, I'm going towards the figures, just because this is where we start with clients, looking at your figures and looking at key metrics. So the materials as a percentage of sales, as I say, generally between 28 and 35%. Generally, there are exceptions to that if it's a certain type of trade. So looking at, because that will show you your margins and whether or not you're charging enough. And getting some kind of financial evaluation. Your accountants often will give it, but you need to ask for it. Others will be very good and have an annual review with you and to go through those sorts of things. It very much depends on where the challenge lies, whether it's in marketing or the team or customer service, finance systems.
I understand. I always try to get something that can give like an instant sort of something someone can go and do right now. Is there any app or anything that someone can get that can just sort of start getting them on the journey to sort of self-development and learning and things like that? Is there time management app or anything like that?
Well, I guess there's the book. Yeah. And that's, again, I would say talent dynamics. That's something that can do. Just email me at alison@evolveandgrowcoaching.com or go on the website evolveandgrowcoaching.com. But the book as well, it's lovely to hear that you've benefited from it. I would say that's a good starting point, because there's a checklist in the front of it which will signpost them to the right chapter for them.
Is the book available on Audible, or is it too visually sort of? Not
yet. That's a good point, actually, because I have had a lot of people. It's available on Amazon at the moment, but I've had a lot of people ask about if I'm going to do an Audible version of it, and more than open to that. But that's the challenge: is how do you get across those visuals? On an Audible version.
Yeah,
But I'm not saying I wouldn't. I haven't ruled it out.
I definitely a lot of people in the communities that I'm involved in. Audible, the Audible app
Yes.
is like their
Yeah.
heartbeat, you know. So because it's so easy to. I'm a big believer in physical book. I do listen to a lot of audio, but reading a book, holding a book, to me has more value to me, if
Right.
that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But that said, if I'm on a 2-hour journey, you know, there's nothing better than being able to stick some earphones in and concentrate on driving while listening to something that educate me. So yeah, I would definitely be keen to see it in an audible version. But like you say, the visuals are so good in it. It's I think this is a physical, primarily is for physical book, isn't it?
Yeah.
Even looking back now, I'm looking through as we're talking, and I'm looking at some of the visual elements, and it's just sparking things from when I read it properly a few years back. So
it's interesting. I mean, we are about to start our own podcast series. We're in the process of recording them, so
wow, excellent.
They'll be pushed out there. I suppose the Trades and Builders Facebook group, which is how I believe we met. So that would be a good one to join, because as soon as it's released, it'll go out through there and on the website as well.
Okay, excellent. I'll make sure that we link your group as well, because like I say, that's when I read the book, then I started stalking you online, as everyone does nowadays, to find out who this lady was. And so I think we're going to have to wrap up now. So I just want to say thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you.
And hopefully some of the people that will listen will come over and maybe get involved with what you're doing, because I definitely feel what you're doing is much needed in this sector of industry. And hats off to you for getting out there and doing it, definitely. So
thank you very much. Thank you.
Speak to you soon, Alison.
Yes, will do.
Thank you for listening. This episode was brought to you by Off the Tools, in association with the Worcester Bosch 8000 lifestyle range.
I really hope you enjoyed the show. I just wanted to put it out there for anyone listening that I offer business coaching, but also life coaching. My life is centered around something called the 3 Bs, which stands for body, business, and balance. When you work with me as a coach, we tackle all 3 aspects of life. So you as an individual, body, mindset, health, fitness, knowledge, education. Business B obviously stands for your business, improving, maximizing opportunities, elevating, making more money. And balance stands for your friends, family, loved ones, making time for everything in your life. And the 3 Bs is the core element to that. If you'd like to learn more, I would ask you to reach out to me on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, wherever you might be consuming my information. Or you can email me directly at wayne@offthetools.co.uk. I'm here waiting to assist you to elevate across all aspects of life. Have a good one. No excuses. Let's go.